Last week we brought you the story of Fremantle's struggle to control the number of beggars on its street. Tonight we look at what's being done to get the growing number of people sleeping rough on Perth streets into homes of their own. This week support groups conducted a survey of the city's homeless population in an attempt to better understand the nature and the scale of the problem. Charlotte Hamlyn reports.
It's 4 o'clock in the morning. It's dark. It's cold, and a search is underway for some of Perth's most vulnerable citizens. This week, groups of volunteers got up early, leaving the comfort of their beds to take to the streets to try to better understand those who sleep rough in the Perth CBD.
We're really trying to understand what are the circumstances of the person, so how long have they been homeless, do they have any family connections or other supports.
Perth's rapidly growing and ageing population is dealing with a massive public housing shortage and astronomical increases in rent. That's forcing more people into homelessness and putting pressure on Perth's support services. This week's task was to compile a register of Perth's homeless, the first of its kind in WA.
What it allows us to do is then to follow up people as a person. So it's not there are these hundreds of homeless people, it's we can identify a particular individual and then go out and try and tailor some service delivery to that person to actually move their circumstances into a better place.
One man who can vouch for the benefits of tailored support is Ross Laws. He'd been living on the streets on and off for years before he finally made his way to the top of the public housing waiting list 3 months ago with the help of Rua Community Services. He's now living in a 3-bedroom home in Hilton with his 2 children. And what was life like before that? Where were you living?
Just doing it rough on the streets and hard, very hard, yeah.
What was that like?
You get depressed and you're unhappy and most of the people turn around and turn on to drugs and alcohol and it's a street life, it's like that.
Anglicare recently did a survey in Perth where they worked out that I think it was less than 1% of available rental accommodation in Perth on a given weekend was actually affordable for someone who lives on a Centrelink benefit. I mean, that is crazy. How can people who are on minimum wage or on a Centrelink payment actually afford to live in Perth?
All right, so we'll keep going both sides?
Yeah. Registry Week was designed to get a better insight into the lives of people like Ross, particularly when it comes to their health.
But when you're on the streets, your health goes right down, yeah. But you don't worry about it, really. You don't care, and all that.
Homeless people don't live particularly long. They probably have the poorest health of any group in our community. We expect that a homeless person would live to about the age of 45, so incredibly low.
Dr. Andrew Davies works with the homeless day to day and was called in to assess survey participants.
We know very little about this population in Perth. There really isn't any research that's been done looking at the health issues. And I guess this is a great opportunity at the beginning.
This week's survey raised serious concerns about the health of Perth's homeless population. Of the 185 homeless people surveyed, a third had drunk alcohol every day for the past month. More than a third were suffering from mental illness, substance abuse and a medical problem, and more than half had been the victim of a violent attack since becoming homeless. The state government has contributed almost $70 million to tackle homelessness in WA.
A lot of people out there, if it's not put in front of them, they just don't understand. A lot of people will say, oh, why don't they get off their backside and get a job? Well, it's like when I used to be working as doing the social work, I used to say to people, if they have 1 problem, 2 problem, 3 problem, 4, 5, 6, how do they ever get back to the first problem? It's just compounding one after the other, and it makes it very difficult.
Over the past 4 years, the government has implemented 14 new services and 110 new workers in the sector to try to get people from the streets into a home. Next week, the demand on current accommodation will be somewhat relieved with the official opening of the $34 million Lime Street development in East Perth, run by St Bartholomew's House.
So Charlotte, this is one of our actual crisis rooms that people will come and live in when they come into our service. There's a nice
St Bart's has been providing homeless support services for 50 years, but lately has been unable to keep up with demand.
We know that we have an expanding population here in Perth. We're the fastest growing capital city in Australia, and we're also one of the most expensive. So you put those two factors together and you get issues around the gaps. What's happening in the gap? How are people falling through the cracks? And what can we do to address that? And we are, sadly, having to turn people away from our services, especially our crisis service and long-term housing, just because of the lack of options and the lack of space.
The 148-bed facility will provide crisis accommodation, transitional units for people trying to move out of homelessness, some longer-term independent units, and 40 residential aged care beds.
I call it a community in a building, not the other way around, because of the numbers of different things that are going to be actually happening here. But for a start, it provides us with a tool, a resource that we don't have at the moment, or we have in a limited capacity.
But will it be enough to make a dent in the number of people sleeping rough?
Is it enough? No. It's great that St Bart's has done that, and I really commend them for doing that. But we just need to be developing projects like that. You know, there needs to be the government, there needs to be community housing providers. You know, I'd really love to be able to see, you know, the private sector be able to come in and be part of these types of developments as well. You know, there are good examples in other places where that's happened.
All service providers agree that better understanding the problem will help to solve it, and Registry Week has been a good start. But Ross Laws says the key to cutting the rate of homelessness in WA is putting yourself in someone else's shoes.
You can't say what it's like to you. You've done it yourself. Some of the people who want to do it, help the others, I reckon they should go on the streets, at least stay on the streets and live it rough, so they realise how hard it is.
Charlotte Hamlyn reporting there.